Okay, so we're back in Poland again. This place is called Bochów, and rightly so, because as you see up there, that was the stork's nest with a couple of storks on it. That's Bocian in Polish, so Bochów is the place of the storks. So it would be pretty ironic if it didn't have any. But it does, so that's alright then. However, they go away in winter. They don't change the name of the town for that, because they know that they'll be back again in summer. They make jolly sure they get some, because otherwise the name of the town would be a little bit silly. Bochów without Bocians. Now, of course, there are cameras everywhere in Poland, speed cameras. They tried this about 10 years ago, and of course all the Poles went around ruining the cameras, spray painting their lenses and things like that. The authorities gave up, but now they've been given money from the European Union to do it, and so they have to do it, and so they have to keep going. And somehow the spirit of Poles these days is not what it was, and they don't spray paint their cameras anymore, their speed cameras anymore. So obviously the fluorine in the water's doing its work. People aren't as bothered by these things as they used to be. This town is called Koryto, which means the trough. There's a nightclub there called Alibi, and outside of it it's placed a huge blow-up woman, a blow-up giant woman outside as its advertisement to the passing motorists. So it really is a trough, that place. Najistniejsza koryta. This is a fine evening, 31 degrees in Warsaw, driving home from work again. I put my camera on really basically, apart from the fact that there were some fine young women around that I thought needed to be immortalised for YouTube. I put camera on because I haven't done it for a while, and I thought to myself, if I don't keep doing it, oh, there's the police. Oh, it's the Straż. The Straż, they're a bunch of difficult characters. They can be. They're not real police, you see, and that's what gives them a big chip on their shoulder sometimes. Sometimes they can be a lot harder to deal with than the police. And of course, when it comes to looking after your safety and fighting the real criminals, you won't get much help out of the Straż, which always kind of means that whatever the police might have to do by way of collecting money for the government, the fact that the police do occasionally do really good stuff, yeah, for society, means that I kind of grin and bear it more than I otherwise would. But these folk, they don't do anything heroic. All they do is they're on the collection side completely, and that makes them very, very not only difficult to deal with, but also, you know, nobody particularly likes them, and they know it. So they've got nothing to lose by being as obnoxious as they can hang together. So yeah, I just thought if I don't keep doing it, then I'll get out of the habit of doing it. I didn't have anything to say when I turned it on, and I probably still don't. But just it's always worth having it on just to get a bit of a feel for Warsaw. This car has just recently been washed. So there's a nice clean front window screen there to film out of. who knows. Between here and the end of the journey, I might have even thought up a couple of things to comment on, which might be worth you hearing. Certainly of late some interesting things have happened regarding the weather. It's gone from quite a cold start to the summer to suddenly record highs, which just goes to show that nature's compensating for itself the whole time. It's just the swings are getting bigger. The swings are much larger than I can remember them before. So you get an incredibly wet year following an incredibly dry year. You get massively flooded out, and then after that, no doubt we'll have droughts in the next year. Probably 2011 will be a very dry year to make up for the floods we had this year, and everybody will be going about worst drought since 200 years or whatever, and that could actually be rather bad because it results in forest fires and bad crops, especially of fruits and nuts. You wouldn't think that nuts needed to drink that much. I mean, I'm not talking about nut jobs like idiots and what have you. They obviously drink quite a lot, but I mean nuts that you eat, hazelnuts and Brazil nuts, walnuts, you name it. You know, there's all sorts of different nuts. Macadamia nuts. Never sure where to put the stress on that word, whether it's macadamia or macadamia or macadamia or macadamia or what the hell it's supposed to be. I just don't know, because it's the sort of thing which, you know, you read the pack and you see the macadamia, let's say, nuts, but you don't hear somebody learned talking about them by the time you've noticed them in the supermarket, so you don't have really an idea of how it should be pronounced. And then you always mean to go on Wikipedia and click the microphone thing next to the word so that you can hear some American going Macadamia or something like that, yeah, for it. You always intend to do that, and then you never get round to it, because when you've actually got Wikipedia on, you're looking something else up, like, you know, the Mormon leaders or what have you, or something, you know, or some arcane species of fish, and you never remember to look up the correct spelling, not spelling but pronunciation of Macadamia nuts. But on top of that, you've got various other kinds of nuts, and those trees, they all need to drink. They need just the same as fruit trees. They want to have lots of water in the ground. If they don't get a lot of water, then you don't get an awful lot of crop off them. And same as if you don't get a lot of sun, then they don't ripen up properly either. So these are what you need. You need plenty of sun, quite a bit of warmth, though that's not really the critical thing. It's good if they don't get too many pests, so if you had a hard winter before that killed off most of the pests, then that's also good. And if it's nice and wet for them, that's also good. So, and no sort of untoward things like frosts during the flowering season or blooming season, or you know, lightning hitting them or things like that. But if you get a really bad drought, then of course some trees will completely be out of water and they can die. And it's not just a question of getting a bad crop, it's a question of complete death of a tree that's been giving you plums or whatever you might have on it, apricots, peaches, for many, many years. It may fail, you know, and never come back again. Well, that seems to happen in my garden, regardless of whether we've had extreme weather or not. It just seems to be part of the usual course for that. So he wants to go that way, does he? Right, you go that way. Up to you what you want to do. And so that's why I would worry more about too much drought than about too much flood. We've had flood this year, and a lot of people, of course, who had their homes flooded out. Go on then, if you're going to start edging forward, you might as well get on with it. That's what I pretty much expect you to start pushing forward. Then they're not doing much. Okay, you think now, stop wintering on about you now. It's amazing how a little gesture like that turns a person around, doesn't it? But basically, leaving aside the problem of people that have had their I'm a bit worried that police might be there. I'll put that down. Just as I pass them, I think. Just don't want to tempt them too much to come up and say what you're doing with that when you're driving. But you know, not wishing to belittle in any way the people that have had their homes wrecked and their cars wrecked by water, and certainly even some people lost their lives. It still isn't the same scale of long-term, you know, loss and devastation. You know, you can put things right after a flood relatively quickly. You've seen my videos of the zoo in Prague and around Karlin, and it all gets put right relatively quickly. But when it comes to drought, if you get a forest fire as a result of drought, and that cleans you out a forest which has been growing for 120 years, or the average tree in it is 120 years old. The forest is a lot older than that, but the average tree in it, let's say, is 120 years old, which would be the case in some of the farmed forests, and older than that, of course, in the non-farmed forests. Then you are left with a certain situation. Of course, certain trees you could even cut down after 30 years, and then you've got like certain pines, and then you've got the energetic willow, as it's called, which is so energetic that you can cut it down after 5 or 6 years, and it makes sense to do it in that kind of cycle. So it all depends what tree we're talking about, but nevertheless, that's a lot of years to put right, isn't it, in comparison with just a year or two later, and your flood, even the territory that's been flooded is more fertile afterwards, etc. And certainly trees don't usually die as a result of floods, although in really extreme cases they can be uprooted, but that's not many. Whereas when you've got a forest fire, that's going to be, you know, hundreds, maybe thousands of trees just getting burnt, all that carbon just plopped into the atmosphere at once. Whole towns, I mean, Moscow was, as a result of a forest fire, when I lived in Moscow nearby, the whole of Moscow was in a kind of smog. And I got a little piece of soot that actually, a sharp piece, actually went into my cornea. I'm not referring to my jokes here. Into my eye, the white of my eye, and actually embedded itself in and made me look bloodshot for a long period of time, and eventually rectified itself. Strange enough, it didn't fully rectify itself until I went on my diet, which you wouldn't think would affect the eye, but maybe it does, I don't know. And park, so I'm going to go take my son in that park later for fun, for a bit of a walk, let him use up his energy and get some of my calories off as well. But basically, you know, drought's a bad thing, and I'm predicting drought probably next year as a result of the fact that this year we had a wet year, and nature always compensates itself, just as we see now, 31 degrees, and recently there's been more, it's been closer to 40, which is compensation for the earlier cold summer. Nature always does this, and the swings are just getting larger between the extremes. Why people are saying, oh, it's the hottest this, coldest that, driest, wettest on record, because the swings are getting bigger. What you gain on the swings, you lose on the roundabouts, of course, and that means that things are less predictable. You've got to take a new look. If you buy a home these days, my suggestion is you take a look and see where the watercourses are that could possibly flood it. If it's high up, you want to make sure you've got a lightning conductor on the top of it. You want to make sure, apart from anything else, that it's reasonably well guarded, or at least a discreet place, so that you're fairly safe in it, that people can't spy on you there easily, and you know, you can have your privacy if you need it. That it's got, you know, proper security. That it's got good access to transport routes, because you never know when petrol, there might be a strike and people can't get petrol, and you've got to be using the trams which run off electricity which can be supplied without petrol. So you know, you've got to think of a lot of contingencies when you decide where you're going to live, because where you live can give you a real competitive advantage. Not so much, you know, against employees, because people always understand if your fellow employees they can't get in because their home's flooded, then what's likely to happen is that your fellow employees are not going to get demoted for that and you promoted, because you know they're just going to get a lot of sympathy and support, hopefully, unless you work for a sick company. You're just going to get support and not that. But what it does give you is a competitive edge in terms of you don't have all that stress. Okay, if you live next to something which is going to flood and then you see there's a lot of rain, that puts you in stress, and it's stress you don't need. You could have avoided by not living next to a river. Also, you're not going to get bitten by mosquitoes quite that much if you don't live right on the top of a watercourse. Because I don't live near water, because I live quite a way up from the Vistula, and there's no real risk of flooding here, although the underground garage did flood in flash rains, but I didn't put my car in the underground garage, I put it on the ground level garage, and it's withstood pretty aggressive rains so far. My balcony got what looks like a lightning strike at one point, and something got basically curved up and damaged, but it was put back okay. Certainly I get a lot of wind on there, but that has positive as well as negative effects. But basically, we've just got to consider what are the contingencies that could affect me if I live in this place. If you live in a high-rise block of flats, and of course one of the problems is that one of your silly neighbours might start a fire and leave it on. You've got to consider yourself, or how good would the structures in the block of flats against that be. You've always got to think of what risks you could have, because otherwise you're just going to end up getting stress which you could have avoided by planning your place to live, place you're going to buy to live in, more carefully. Because the thing is that these things don't happen every year. They don't happen every 10 years. Yeah? Maybe only one big disaster happens in all the time you're living there. But in the end they do happen, you know, and these things are big when they happen. They wipe out a lot of your peace of mind and a lot of your happiness. So you've got to try not to, because I live away from the river, like I mentioned a second ago, just picking that unfinished sentence back up again. Because I live away from a river, I can't, for example, just take have a mooring in my garden, or I can't easily just take a dinghy, or whatever they call it, or a canoe, and then just walk with it down and enjoy the river for its sporting value. Yeah, I can't do that. So I have to pay for the fact that I'm not on top of a river. But then how much would you really do it even if you lived on top of a river? I don't have the views, which I might get if I lived on top of the river. But how much does one really need that stuff? I mean, if the river's going to flood during the time you own the property on top of it, that kind of cancels out all of the benefits of living near one, in my opinion. Unless you're kind of fishing it every day and eating the fish that come out of it, which, given the state of rivers in Europe these days, I certainly wouldn't advise. Anyway, home now.